Hey folks, John Etchkilder here with Western Mountain Fieldcraft. I've got Astrid over here next to me, and Bjorn's around the corner playing. The oldest is up on the mountain hunting elk with the neighbor right now. And I came across a thing on Facebook. Somebody was talking about flint and steel kits, and a very common practice with flint and steel kits that is a really terrible practice, and that is a lot of guys they'll use their tinder box, and they'll have some tinder in there, but they'll also have their flint and their steel striker in there. And the problem with that is that it beats the hell out of your tinder. So whether you're using char cloth or natural materials like punk wood and stuff, it'll just beat it to hell, and it won't work as well after that. So your tinder box should really be for your tinder, for your char cloth or your charred material and stuff. If you look at Miller's paintings and stuff from the fur trade era, a lot of times you'll see guys will have their steel strikers wrapped up with like a wing of brain tin or something hanging from their belt or their sash. And then they'll have, presumably they'll have their flints stashed in somewhere else, like in a strike light pouch or the gage de mort. I don't do that. I don't smoke, so I don't carry a gage de mort, and I don't leave my steel striker hanging up my belt because I'm afraid I'll lose it. So I have a couple of. I'm gonna talk about flint and steel kits here, Frontier Fire kits. And what I use. This is not necessarily a complete Frontier Fire kit. It's what I use. And so I have two different types of strikers here. One is a little more historically accurate. It's a C-shape. It had the little twist on both sides, but it broke off at some point. And then this is a really simple one. This is from Vern's Flint and Steel that he has an eBay store. I've got a handful of these because I got these for the kids, which I'll show you why in a minute. And then I tend to hand these out to students when they come out here and train with us and stuff. If they don't have a flint and steel kit, if they've never used flint and steel before, or they don't have their own kit, I'll give them one of these and a couple pieces of English flint, and then a small, not the Hudson Bay brass tins, just little folding tins. And then a big wad of char cloth and stuff. But anyway, so I do carry the Hudson Bay tins. There's a lot of argument in the buckskinner world about whether these are actually historically accurate or not. I don't know. I know there are some extant models of these in museums in Canada that are supposed to be period original. I don't know, but it's really, really convenient for me, so it's what I carry. And the reason it's so convenient is it's got a really tight fit, friction fit. It looks cool because it's brass, and it holds a lot of char cloth. This doesn't have very much char cloth in it now, and does have a little piece of birch bark in there, which we'll talk about in a minute. But having the burning lens on it, so I don't have to worry about it, getting lost and separated and stuff, is really, really handy. So for years and years and years, I wouldn't carry for like a decade and a half, probably 2 decades, I wouldn't carry a burning lens. I was like, if when I really, really need a fire, I'm not going to have, the sun's not going to be out, and so there's no point in carrying one. And what I realized, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, is that a lot of times here in Wyoming especially, when it's really, really, really brutal cold, the sun is shining. It's a beautiful, sunshiny, clear sky day like that. There's just a lot of snow on the ground and the wind's blowing. So I started carrying one. I use it all the time in the winter. All the time. Probably more in the wintertime than I use my flint and steel if I'm on snowshoes or horseback or something and need a fire. But so these are great little boxes. They're kind of pricey. I could probably, for the price one of these cost me, I could get a little flip fold lid or tin and a separate burning lens, and probably get like 3 or 4 sets of that for the price of one of these, but these look cool. So what I do is, instead of putting my flint and steel in here, is I have a little linen bag, and this is linen that I waxed with bear tallow. It's a hand sewn bag. I double plied some hemp rope to make the drawstring for it. I need to redo my edges on the drawstring loop, but and then I just waxed it with, or I didn't wax it. I tallowed it with bear tallow, and so this will carry my tin plus a handful of flints. So I have a handful of big chunks of black English flint, and then I have actually a trade gun flint that I bought and just to try out. It works great, obviously. And then it'll carry the steel in there. Okay, so this being greased adds a little bit of waterproofing protection for the char cloth, or the charred material, whatever I've got in my tin. And then this, in turn, is going to go into a larger greased bag, canvas bag. This one is actually canvas. Oh no, this one's linen too, actually. I have a mat bag that is hand sewn that looks almost identical to this, but it's made out of canvas, waxed canvas. And this is filled with just a big handful of sagebrush bark. Okay. In the past, I've used juniper bark, I've used dried grass, I've used cottonwood bark, inner bark off like a fallen down dead cottonwood. Tree is fantastic. Sagebrush is really easy for me because we're surrounded by it. We live in the sagebrush steppe. So I generally try to carry 3 to 4 fires worth of bird's nest or tinder bundle material in this. And then my fire kit just drops right inside too. This will fit in my market wallet. It'll fit in a saddlebag if I'm using modern style saddlebags on horseback. If I'm going to be on snowshoes, in the wintertime and I'm using a haversack instead, it takes up quite a bit of room in a haversack, but I can roll it up in my bedroll too. So a couple things here that I have besides that is, number one, I like to carry a couple chunks of grass rope. These are usually cut off from other projects, off the ends of ropes and stuff, because this stuff will break down into multiple strands of really fine material. I think Astrid got bored. That you can then, in turn, make your tinder bundle out of, your bird's nest out of. If you don't have sagebrush, or you can't find any that day, or everything is just drenched, having a couple chunks of cut off rope is pretty handy. Not essential, but handy. And then something that works really, really well for fire starting, if you happen to have it where you grow, is white birch bark. Now, white birch bark doesn't grow in this part of Wyoming. You got to go way up into Montana to get it around here, I think. But a friend of mine in Maine actually sent me a box of it. So I have a big wad of it that I can play with. And I showed that piece of birch bark that was in the tinder box. That actually came with one of the Vern's flint steel kits. And it works, but it didn't work great. So I'm going to replace that with some of this now that this has arrived. He also sent me some tinder fungus that I need to process. But I have another flint and steel kit that rides in my muzzleloader shooting pouch, and it has got, instead of char cloth, it actually has charred punkwood in it. And so this is a really great fire kit method. It's historically proven. So modern lighters are a modern invention, going back to roughly the World War I era. Butane lighters are even newer than that. And the thing about butane lighters here is the boiling point of butane is 31.7 degrees Fahrenheit. So anytime it is below 32 degrees, that butane is not going to evaporate and ignite the way that we expect it to very reliably. If you've been carrying it in a pocket, you'll get a minute or two where it's still warm enough, depending on how cold it is out. It may be warm enough you can get it to light for a second, but when it's like 20 or 30 below, a butane lighter is not something to count on, and relying on that for your survival fire or for, getting lost hunting in late elk season is probably not conducive to survival. Um, Matches are certainly an option. I carry matches everywhere I go, every day. I've got this little old Marbles match, I think this is Marbles. It's probably not because it says made in Hong Kong. But it's a Marbles design. And then I've got a handful of Hurricane matches in here and a striker section in it. Matches are fine, but here's the thing about matches, okay, is so matches, slivers of wood with sulfur on the tip, have been around since sometime in the 18th century. Striker matches that you could, but people would use their flint and steel and a piece of charcloth to light the sulfur on fire. Striking matches really didn't come about until the mid 1830s, and they weren't reliable and in commercial production until just before the American Civil War. So let's start with that. Matches really became commonly available, the late 1850s. By the 1950s, so 100 years, for most purposes, matches were considered obsolete. Guys were carrying Zippos and then later butane. Well, I don't remember exactly when butane lighters came about, but we're carrying lighters because matches are fine. And there was a long time, there was a period of time in there where the mark of a woodsman was being able to strike a fire with one match. The problem with matches, even in a match safe, is they're really hard to get to work in the wet. Okay? And even these Hurricane matches, they burn really hot, but they burn really fast. And so a lot of times, even if you've got a perfect fire lay start and a perfect tinder bundle, these won't work very reliably. I've had situations where it was nice weather like today, and it took me 2 or 3 matches to get a fire going that with flint and steel would have taken me, one piece of charcloth and a couple strikes of the flint and steel. So I'm a big fan of flint and steel because flint and steel was in use from essentially the beginning of the Iron Age until, certainly the Western Indian Wars. I don't know that by the Spanish-American War, I don't know that anybody was actually carrying them, but they're super reliable. It's an extraordinarily time-tested method. You certainly don't have to have a metal firebox or tinderbox. There's some plants out there that will catch a spark and ignite. But for like $5 for a tin of Altoids that you eat the Altoids and keep the tin, you've got a great tinderbox. And then you need a flint striker, which you can absolutely use an old file or an old chisel and just cut it to length and grind the teeth off one side, and it works great as a striker. And then while I use English flints almost exclusively, you can absolutely pick up chert almost anywhere in this country and get it to strike sparks off of steel. So if I lost my steel or broke my steel, it's not a big deal to find a new steel striker. If I lose my flints, it's not a big deal to find a new piece of chert laying on the ground. In fact, when we were down at Lone Tree in southern Wyoming for the Rocky Mountain National Rendezvous this year, I was walking along the path and looked down, and there was a chunk of chert about this big laying there that I grabbed and took back to camp with me and started sparks. And it wasn't something somebody had dropped out of their flint and steel kit. It was just a piece of rock laying there. So flint and steel is a great option because it's so simple and because it is so proven. Okay, it doesn't have a century of use. It doesn't have 2 centuries of use. It has a millennia of use and proven track record. So what I'm going to do is I am going to demonstrate the starting method of a simple flint and steel fire here. So I'm going to pull out some of my tinder from my tinder bag. And it doesn't take a whole lot. Like, I've seen a lot of people that make big tinder bundles out of sagebrush bark or cottonwood bark and stuff. And that's fine. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's certainly going to be more sure. But if, like, for instance, here where I live, sagebrush is everywhere. We're on the sagebrush steppe. But when I go up the mountain to go elk hunting, as soon as I get above about 8,000 feet, the sagebrush goes away. And we're in pine and fir and spruce country. And so while there's dead grass and stuff up there that will work, it doesn't work very well in the wintertime because it's buried in snow. And so being able to carry this with me is handy. And the less of it I use, the longer my supply will last. So I've just made a little bundle here. I didn't even really make a bird's nest out of it. I'll pull out a flint and my striker. And then I'll pull out a piece of char cloth. I'm going to set my char cloth on top of my flint. Okay, if I was using punk or something, charred punk wood, I would do it the opposite way, but this is the most common way to do it. And then I'm going to hold this at an angle and I'm going to strike this down along the edge of it. What we're trying to do is shave microscopic bits of steel off with the sharp edge of the flint. I think you guys can see that, and I've caught an ember right there. You can kind of see it glowing. So now I'm going to put that in the middle of my little bundle of tinder. And it helps you hold it up so you're not breathing in smoke. And we've got a fire. Now, I want to make sure it's out. We actually had a range fire here this summer, and because one of our neighbors had been burning brush and didn't put the fire out all the way, so I don't want to be that guy.
We didn't either.
Yes, you're right. They didn't mean to either.
Well,
And that's...
you didn't finish it. That's what I said.
Ouch. So if all you do is light your little tinder bundle and you don't have your fire lay prepared, it's not going to do you any good. That's going to burn out pretty fast. And I will do a video in the near future on actually building a fire with this method, but that is a really, really handy, simple method. You know, it works really reliably. The other thing I want to show you, though, is one like everybody's pretty familiar with, at least in passing. Wow, that's got a big, thick piece of sagebrush bark in the middle of it that doesn't want to break very easily. So, I'll just cut it. So we're going to do essentially the same thing, but we're going to use a different method. And what's cool about this second method is it's really, really fast to get a spark. Like that didn't take very long, obviously, with my flint and steel, but so I'll pull out another piece of char cloth. Mm-hmm. And all I'm going to do, and you guys can't really see it because, oh, maybe you can. I've got to get it where the sun is shining, and then I'll focus my lens on that until I get it really, really focused. Well, if I can get it focused enough. No, just hold on. Well, I'm having trouble getting enough sun. Oh, there we go. Now I got it. I wasn't holding it at the right angle, and I didn't have a lot of angle. Hopefully you guys can see the orange right there, but if not, you'll see it in a second. So then we'll cram that in the middle of our little sage bundle. And we have another fire. So I am grinding this out in the mineral dirt with my foot. And then when we're done with this video, we're going to dump some water over it also. But so the thing with the fire lens is it works, but you got to have sun, obviously, direct sun. And even a little bit of shadow will keep it from happening. So you have to play with the angle a little bit to get it focused directly on your charred material. But if you have sun, it works really, really well. And I'll show you an example of a standalone lens. This one's got all kinds of debris and stuff on it. Okay, there's a standalone lens. And you can even, I don't know that it'll work now, but if you don't have char cloth, you can sometimes get material to ignite with just, there we go, it's smoking already. Let me lift it up, maybe you guys will be able to see the smoke coming off of it. It'll take a little bit longer because, number one, I just ground this into the wet dirt.
It's heated up now, though.
It is heating up. We can see smoke. I don't know if you can see smoke on the camera or not. So what I'm going to show you guys is the little burnt spot or little charred spot right there. I'm not going to be able to blow this into a fire because I just ground it into the wet dirt, so everything's damp now. But fire lenses are fantastic. I love carrying fire lenses. I love using fire lenses now. I'm sad that it took me so long to not use them because of my own ignorance about practical uses. But where I spent my childhood back east, most of the time, if you needed in the South, if you needed a fire, it was because it was raining. We didn't get a lot of snow there, and we didn't get really cold there. You know, I can remember it getting down to zero like once or twice when I was a kid. I remember once in junior high, middle school, it got down to like 3 below and the whole world stopped. Now I'm like 3 Below is like, oh, I'm going to go out and feed the animals in shorts and a t-shirt. So the real reason I wanted to talk about this was don't carry your flint striker or your striker and your flint in your tinder box. It's just for tinder. Okay? A great option is to have, and we've all seen the Strike-A-Lite bags, like you used to be able to buy the kit from Tandy Leather, and a lot of people show them, and they're great option to carry the stuff all right on your belt. I carry a flintlock rifle, so I don't need to carry a flint and steel kit on my belt. If I lose my packs, I've got my rifle. I can start a flint and steel fire, which we'll do a video on sometime in the near future. But and then it's really important, in my experience, it's very important, even here in the desert, to have a means to carry reliable tinder. Okay, you can absolutely use a Ziploc bag. In fact, because we use flint and steel to start the fires in the wood stove all winter, what we'll do is the kids will fill multiple 1-gallon Ziploc bags with sagebrush bark, and we'll store those in the living room, right by the firewood and everything, so that we have good tinder material all summer. The problem with the Ziploc bag in a field environment is they don't last very long. A waxed bag like this, even this linen, will probably outlast me. I mean, if my stitching comes out, I restitch it. If it gets a tear, I patch it or stitch it. So this bag would very likely outlast me. I might have to re-wax it every couple of years. Generally, I try to re-grease them every year before winter, but if I didn't last year because I was hurt and I didn't do a lot of outdoor stuff last fall and last winter, this winter I will re-wax this or re-grease it. But it's a great option, is just to have a good sized tinder bag with you, even if it's empty, day to day, and you just fill it up when you walk out the door to go on a trek. This is a great option. Okay, so hopefully this was educational. A lot of you guys are going to see this and be like, yeah, dude, we know that. I've known that for years. But I bet there's some viewers that haven't thought this through this way, and hopefully you'll get some benefit out of this. So, guys, until next time, Astrid, Bjorn, lean in here. Say hi, guys. Hi. Say bye. We'll see you guys next time.